Hello and welcome. I am Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, single game $1 million winner. Here are some NFL DFS picks and lineup advice, both FanDuel and DraftKings, for the first conference championship matchup in the NFL playoffs on Sunday between the Chiefs and the Titans. Be sure to subscribe below to make sure you get all of our latest DFS videos as soon as they are released. So let's start with this Chiefs and Titans game, looking at it from a single game showdown approach. And we'll start, let's talk about injuries to start. No real major injuries. However, the one player that is making a return after missing 6 games is Mr. Adam Humphries. We tweeted a video on our timeline. Be sure to follow us on Twitter if you're not already at Occupy Fantasy. And it was a Friday afternoon interview, which normally bodes well for players returning from injury. And he had a pretty optimistic tone. So it sounds like we'll get Adam Humphries back on the field. Missed the last 6 games. And while he won't play all of the snaps, or even a majority of the snaps, he's still very cheap. This goes for both the Showdown and the 2-game slate. So Humphries, at his price, especially $800 on here, is someone we'll need to keep an eye on. All right. Let's look at this from a low-risk perspective now. Low risk, remember, 50-50s, head-to-heads, double-ups, smaller field contests. Most contests where you can double your entry fees is considered low risk. And what we like to do, as always, in Showdown, if you watched any of our videos or if you've read our daily plug before, you know the drill. 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, try to lock up all the scoring from both sides of the ball, fill in value plays and or kickers or defenses to round out the roster. However, this is going to be extremely tough in this game. And you can possibly get there. Let's just say, all right, if we go with Mahomes, the highest floor, highest ceiling player, Henry, Damian Williams, Ryan Tannehill, that leaves us $200 left per player. Obviously not possible. So what you want to do in this situation is, okay, maybe we try to get to a defense in captain, because there are the salary multipliers on DraftKings. It allows you to fit cheaper guys in captain and still be optimal. So we did something like Chiefs defense in captain, which as a 7-point home favorite is in a great spot. They rank really highly in our model. So, and then we get Mahomes in there. That leaves us $700 per player. Still not a ton. Still not really likely. The other issue with this is we're leaving guys like Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill out of the mix. Now, Hill's volume hasn't been there in recent weeks. Kelce, I know, is coming off a big performance. But again, these guys are at volatile positions, and more times than not, you're going to have the optimal approach by going 2 running backs and 2 quarterbacks. So really tough. You may have to get even trickier and go with a value play or a kicker here at captain to fit these guys in. But as we say, it's really tough on DraftKings. And of course, it's even tougher on FanDuel and actually near impossible, because if you go with the 4 guys that you need, where's Tannehill? That leaves you $500 left per player. Actually impossible. You have to ignore one of these guys, and maybe that's Tannehill. But again, this is impossible. So for all these reasons, we prefer scrapping the low-risk approach, especially on FanDuel, scrapping the low-risk approach, play a small percentage of your bankroll on this single game slate, and go in high-risk contests. Hunt for satellite tickets, single entry, 3 max GPPs, particularly 100-player leagues on FanDuel, and try to return 10, 20 times your investment for a small investment. So in those high-risk contests, what do we want to do? So now this game total is up to 53. I think it's 52.5 now as the time of this recording, Saturday morning. Up from 51.5 where it opened. It's going to be cold, but the betting markets haven't been swayed from a high-scoring game with the increase in the total. So with that high of a total, we generally like pass catchers in our captain and MVP spots. But we also have 2 high-volume running backs, guys like Derrick Henry and Damian Williams. So they're in the mix as well. Let's take a look at last week's Showdown slate, and I'll bring up DraftKings while we talk about this. If we look at last week's Houston and Kansas City Showdown slate, some interesting ownership numbers to consider for this week. Last week, Mahomes was 75% owned overall, 15% as captain. And with Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins last week, that took away some ownership. Watson was 55% overall, 10% captain. That means Mahomes' numbers could be up this week. We could see him getting to that 20% captain range, maybe 80% overall. Damian Williams was 53% overall, 19% captain. Tyreek 48 overall, 12 captain. Kelsey just 41%, 9 captain. But on FanDuel, and this is no surprise, we see this trend every week because of the 5-player approach, because of the lack of a salary multiplier, because of the half-point PPR scoring. Quarterbacks are more often the optimal captain, especially guys like Mahomes. And Mahomes was 80% overall, which is still probably not enough, but 44% MVP. And even that might not be enough in this game. I imagine he'll get a couple extra points here in this matchup, but we love the idea of playing Patrick Mahomes as your MVP and then figuring out the rest. Deshaun Watson was 63% overall, 21% MVP. Well, I think we'll see lower numbers for Tannehill here. And then you have the position players who were just 10% or less. Damian 9%, Tyreek 10%, Kelsey just 3% overall in the MVP spot last week. And that's going to be a trend that you always see on FanDuel and high-risk contests. So for FanDuel, what do? You want touchdown scorers, you want quarterbacks in your MVP and high-risk contests, and then figure out the rest. So Mahomes, Henry, Tannehill, probably the guys you want to consider for your FanDuel MVP high-risk contest. And if you just go 100% Mahomes, we have no problem with that. What you need to do, though, with an MVP who's 50% owned, you have to leave on FanDuel $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 left over to have a shot at a unique lineup. Now, the lower number of entries in the contest, the less unique you have to be. If you're playing a big GPP, the more unique you need to be. So something to keep in mind. But guys who are in this lower tier that could potentially score a touchdown and outscore guys that are priced $2,000 or $3,000 more than them. Blake Bell, who caught the touchdown last week, tight end for Kansas City, he's $5K. Demarcus Robinson, 5,500. He's going to play a ton of snaps. Kansas City plays a ton of 3 receiver sets. Michael Pruitt's going to play 60% of the snaps for Tennessee, as long as things go their way, and he'll get a couple targets. Tajay Sharp won't play as much with Adam Humphries back, but he did have 57 air yards on 2 targets last week, so he's a guy. Ferkser, Khalif Raymond, we talked about him literally on this video last week. He scored the long touchdown. Deion Lewis in a game script where Tennessee trails. Mecole Hardman. So lots of guys in this Kansas City game, and just gives us more confidence to use a guy like Mahomes as our MVP. Now in DraftKings, we prefer guys like Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelsey, A.J. Brown, receivers, PPR format in a high total game. They're much more likely to be the optimal captain. Get your Mahomes MVP exposure over on FanDuel. DraftKings, use these pass catchers. One other guy we should talk about here is Sammy Watkins. And Chris Rooney, our NFL Daily Plug writer, mentioned this in this week's Daily Plug. Sammy Watkins has not scored a touchdown since week 1 when he scored 3 against Jacksonville. So he's as close to his underperforming receiver as we get. Like over the course of the year, just impossible for him not to be scoring touchdowns. And this may sound crazy. While Tyreek Hill has more targets overall over the last 4 weeks, dating back to the last 3 weeks of the regular season, the divisional round last week, Tyreek Hill has 8 more targets than Watkins. That's not surprising to anyone. But what may be more surprising to people is that Watkins has a higher average depth of target, 5 yards, in fact. 5 yards higher, 14 to 9 compared to Tyreek Hill. So Watkins getting more high-value targets down the field, just not as many. So a guy like Watkins, who is cheaper and will be 1 or 2% owned in the MVP or captain spot on DraftKings, makes for a great high-risk captain play in a high total game. So, all right, that'll do it for this video. Hopefully, gave you some strategies and some lineup tips for all contest types for this Chiefs and Titans matchup. For more in-depth analysis, go to occupyfantasy.com. You can check out our Occupy model that ranks every player on both sites, and our Daily Plug, which has notes, lineup advice for all contest types, and slates for tomorrow's games. Be sure to subscribe below. Get notified when our latest videos are released. If you like what we did here, we appreciate it if you give us a thumbs up. It helps us out. And if you have any questions about the slate or comments, drop us a line below, and we'll answer you before the slate starts at 3:40 Eastern, 3:05 Eastern on Sunday. All right, for Brian Jester, Occupy Fantasy, appreciate you all listening. Take care, good luck, and we'll talk to you soon.